The old couple slowly came to the river. Then they picked up the stones on the ground and put them in their pockets without hesitation. Then they held each other's hands and walked firmly into the lake. Unable to bear the pressure of caring for their children, they chose to end their lives in this way. But they were afraid that there would be no one to take care of their son after they died. So they hired a beautiful young nanny for $100,000 a month in the hope that she would take over the care of their child after they left. But strangely enough, the old man's son was just a porcelain doll. Linda couldn't help but laugh at this scene, thinking they were joking. However, when she saw the serious expression on the old man's face, she realized that it was not a joke. Just when Linda didn't know what to do, the grocery store owner broke the awkward atmosphere for her, watching the man and the mannequin shake hands in a friendly manner. In order to keep her well-paying job, the woman had no choice but to shake hands with the mannequins in a decent manner. The old woman told her that her son was very demanding. She had hired many nannies before, but he didn't like them, so she fired them all. Surprisingly, he fell in love with the young and beautiful Linda. The old woman then explained the daily routine to Linda. Every morning at 7 a.m., she had to wake the boy up and change his clothes. Then she reads poetry to him for 3 hours. Not only that, but you have to eat with him, and the music must be turned up during the meal. That way he'll get an appetite. And then he goes to bed at 9, and before he goes to sleep, he has to read him a story and say good night. But all this seemed so strange to Linda. She thought that these two old people might be very sick. At night, she had to tell her best friend. Not only were there no neighbors, there was no signal, but she told her it was the best way to get away from an abusive ex-husband. If you don't have a signal, he won't bother you, and he's just taking care of a porcelain doll. Linda was forced to give up, but the next day, something weird happened. In the morning, the old lady was cursing at the doll, complaining about the mess she made of the room. But then she was soothing and comforting. While Linda was wondering what was going on, the old man suddenly appeared from behind him. And took out a daily work schedule. Before he left, he told Linda that his son was different from the others. His son is different from others. He has to follow the schedule strictly. If you're nice to him, he'll be nice to you. If you're not nice to him, he'll be nice to you. The old woman interrupted the old man and handed the doll to Linda. Then they went on vacation, but they were going to kill themselves as soon as the two old men left. The woman threw the doll on the bench in a fit of impatience, but the creepy face was so horrible that she covered it with a blanket. Next, she started making her favorite sandwich, drinking a glass of wine, and reading her favorite book. She left the doll behind for a while, but just as she was putting away her glass of wine and getting ready to take a break, a strange thing happened. The blanket that was supposed to cover the doll's face had somehow slipped off, but she didn't take it seriously. She carried him to her room and left him on a chair without looking back. What she didn't realize was that something terrible would happen in the evening. A clap of thunder woke Linda up, and there seemed to be something downstairs. She picked up a candle and stepped in to see what was there. She found a picture of the old man and the boy, but the boy didn't look like their son by age, but more like their grandson. Just when she was puzzled, suddenly a hand grabbed her neck. Luckily, it was just a dream. The frightened Linda seemed to realize something. She went to the boy's room and found the doll in its original position. But as she got closer, she realized that there was a tear on the doll's face. It was as if a child had been left out in the cold and was crying. Just as she was in shock, a drop of water suddenly fell, and when the woman looked up, it turned out that the ceiling was leaking. Linda was relieved, but she still carried the doll to her bed. But just as she was about to go upstairs to check out the leakage, she found that the stairs wouldn't open. A few days later, the owner of the grocery store came to make another delivery. Linda found a chance to ask about the dolls. Then the man took the woman to the tombstone of the old couple's son. He told her that their son had died in a fire a long time ago. Because they missed the child so much, they customized the doll. If the child had grown up normally, he would have been about the same age as them. Jack saw Linda's concern and invited him out for a night of poker. Linda didn't think twice about taking on a man with a sense of humor, but just as she was about to take a shower for her date, she realized that the mannequin was staring at her. But the woman didn't care. She just closed the door. But while she was taking a shower, her red dress suddenly slipped and her necklace fell off. After taking a bath, the woman suddenly realized that she had lost a handful of hair. She also realized that her necklace and red dress had disappeared. After searching the room, she couldn't find her clothes, so she panicked. At that moment, she suddenly realized that the staircase, which she couldn't open yesterday, had been automatically released. She thought it was Jack's prank, so she picked up her stick and prepared to go up and teach him a lesson. However, just as she was climbing up to the attic, the stairs automatically retracted. The woman was terrified and tried to open the stairs again, but she couldn't. She saw Jack through the window, waiting for her at the door. But even though she screamed at the top of her lungs, no one below her could hear her. Jack, seeing that Linda had not come out, thought that she had rejected him and left in despair. Unbeknownst to him, the woman was banging on the window, but to no avail. She watched the car leave. Just when she didn't know what to do, suddenly a figure appeared and she fell to the ground. Linda was so shocked that she fainted instantly. When the woman woke up again, it was already daytime, and she saw that the man from last night was just a piece of clothing, so she was just scaring herself. Suddenly, the stairs opened up again. Without hesitation, the woman went down the stairs. After making sure no one was there, Linda called Jack and told the man about last night's strange events, but the man just touched the staircase and it closed automatically. It turned out to be an automatic staircase. He told Linda there was nothing to worry about, but she could tell the man for sure that someone had come in because her clothes were missing. But Jack thought Linda was dreaming because the burglar wouldn't just steal her clothes and would have closed the door for him when he left. When the woman saw him say that, she thought it made sense. The man saw that Linda was still a little worried and wanted to stay, but it wasn't a good idea to be alone. The woman refused him. On the second day, the woman realized that the mannequin was staring at her. She tried to fix his head. Suddenly, the mannequin turned his head again. Linda was awakened again, but when she got to the doll's room, she found the mannequin lying flat on his back and sitting up, and there was a work schedule next to it. As if to express her dissatisfaction with Linda's lack of work and money, Linda was so scared that she hurriedly locked the door to her room and immediately picked up the phone to call for help. But the voice on the other end of the line was that of a mannequin. The woman immediately threw away the phone. Just then, a figure suddenly appeared in the doorway, and the voice of the mannequin came out. He said he had prepared breakfast for him. The woman opened the door trembling. She found that it was her favorite sandwiches. At this moment, the woman thought of what the old man had said. As long as you are good to him, he will be good to you. Thinking of this, Linda not only did not panic, but smiled instead. Although the mannequin is a bit creepy, but as long as she is sincere to him, he wouldn't hurt her. Since then, Linda began to strictly follow the requirements. Wake up the mannequin on time to eat with him and recite poems for him. I didn't think the strange things would ever happen again. That day, Jack came to make another delivery. He invited Linda to play poker with him again. But after this incident, she turned Jack down because she still had to take care of the dolls. The man heard that it was a bit of a joke. It's just a doll. Why take it seriously? To get Jack to believe her, he put the doll on the ground and drew a circle around it. Then he told the doll that if he didn't want her to leave, then when he heard the knock on the door, he should step out of the circle. The woman closed the door. Then she knocked on the door next door. The man thought Linda was sick, but when he opened the door again, a strange thing happened. The doll was gone. The man was dumbfounded and believed what the woman said. He thought it was because the couple's son was burned to death and possessed the doll. But it was a weird thing to do, so Jack planned to stay here, also to protect the woman's safety. But that night, after Linda had calmed the dolls, they were about to play poker, but then a strange noise came from outside. They went downstairs and found the doll sitting on a chair. The music had been turned on by someone. The woman realized that the doll was jealous, seeing that the mannequin had spoiled his good deed. He had to tell Linda about the past. When the boy was alive, there was a girl who came to play with him every week, but on the boy's birthday, the girl disappeared. Her body was found in the woods. Just as the police were about to ask the boy for clues, a fire broke out in the boy's house. The boy died in the fire, so he thought the doll might be the boy's evil spirit, a threat to humanity. He wants Linda to leave with him, but Linda didn't think so. She didn't think the doll would hurt him. The man saw no other choice but to let it go. That night, Linda's ex-husband came to the house. Having heard the news from somewhere, he wanted Linda to come back with him, but there was no way the woman would agree. Under the man's persistence, Linda had to let him stay with her. But that night, something strange happened. A drop of blood suddenly dripped on the man's head, and the man called Linda out in anger. The man points to the words, "Get out" on the glass and curses at the woman. That's when the woman realizes it must be the mannequins. Apparently, the man is not welcome in the mannequin, but the ex-husband hears this and thinks it's ridiculous. Feeling that his intelligence had been insulted, he grabbed the mannequin in anger. Ignoring people's advice, it threw the doll to pieces without saying a word. The next moment, something terrible happened. Suddenly the room began to tremble. The lights began to dim and flicker. Everyone panicked. The ex-husband, still in disbelief, pressed himself against the mirror to listen to what was going on inside. Suddenly, the man was knocked several down meters away from the room. Then, as everyone watched in horror, inside the mirror, a masked man slowly crawled out. It turned out that the boy was not dead, but had been hiding in the villa, looking at the man who destroyed his double. The monster pressed him to the ground. Then it took a piece of his body and plunged it into the man's neck to send him to hell. After that, it tried to take Linda. Luckily, Jack was able to knock him to the ground in time and was trying to get away when he got in the way. They rushed upstairs to their room and locked the door, but the window was already locked, and soon the monster came after them. They couldn't open the door, but a big hole was made by his punch. In the nick of time, they opened the closet. There was a secret passage. It turns out that the weirdo works in the secret passage every day. No wonder they couldn't detect it. They went through the secret passage to the weirdo's room. and found that the red dress she stole was actually worn by a straw man. It turns out that her every move is being watched by the freak. Jack pulls Linda away before the women can examine her. However, the man knew the area well and soon found them running away. In order to cover Linda, Jack tried to stay and fight to the death, but the men were no match for the freak and were soon knocked unconscious. Seeing Linda escaping, the monster issued a heartbreaking warning: if she didn't come back, he would kill him. The woman heard this and finally stopped in her tracks. Justice drove her not to run away alone, so she went back to the villa and put the screwdriver in her pocket. As she watched the strange man slowly approaching, Linda began to whisper comforting words to him. She said she would never leave and emphasized that it was time for bed. To her surprise, the monster turned into an 8-year-old again and followed the woman into the room. The woman soothed him and he lay down, but just as Linda was about to leave, the monster grabbed her. He wanted Linda to give him a kiss. Linda had no choice but to comply, but she didn't realize that the man wanted to go further. Without thinking, Linda pulled out a screwdriver and stabbed him. Realizing he'd been tricked, the man threw the woman several meters away. He got up and grabbed the woman by the neck. In the nick of time, Linda pulled out the screwdriver in her stomach and stabbed again. The man fell to the ground, revealing his burned and ugly face. The woman then found Jack, who had fainted, and left the house. But just as they left, the shattered figure was repaired, as if waiting for his next Linda. The man seemed to see something terrible. Then he panicked and closed the steel door. Then he locked it with 108 chains and told his wife and daughter not to make a sound. After making sure everything was safe, the man went into the cellar. But by now, his daughter was too scared to speak. Jack had to calm his frightened daughter. He thought he had escaped from this, but suddenly, there was a violent crash from outside the steel door. They were too frightened to make a sound. Jack slowly stepped forward to take a look. Their hearts were in their throats. Luckily, the steel door was not broken because of the reinforcement of the chain. But in the nick of time, the girl's toy got caught on a screw. Then the accident happened. When the rope was pulled, the doll made a noise. The man tore open the doll's clothes in a hurry. Then he used a knife to cut open the stomach and take out the horn inside. He stomped on it and smashed it to pieces. The sound stopped, but the girl still cried and tried to put the horn back into the doll's stomach. Not realizing that the noise had alerted the monster above, he attacked the steel door again. In no time at all, a chain broke, followed by a second one. Seeing that the steel door could not hold much longer, Jack quickly ran back into the room and pulled down a steel pipe. The woman tries to hold on to the door with her own weight, but the monster's strength was immense. Soon the door was slowly opened. When she saw the monster's face, the woman was stunned. The girl let out an involuntary scream. Just in the nick of time, Jack grabbed a steel pipe and frantically headed towards the monster. Luckily, he was able to repel the monster for the time being, but before they could take a breath, the room began to tremble unconsciously. The men realized that something was wrong, and in the next instant, the steel door was destroyed, and the manhole cover fell to the ground. They looked up at the top without knowing what was happening, only to see several glittering eyes staring at him. The horror of the scene caused the girls to scream again. Jack led them towards the room. The monster was approaching. In a panic, the woman grabbed the oil lamp and threw it at the door. The doorway was quickly sealed by the flames. Then they worked together to move the cabinet. They blocked the doorway completely. In a moment of crisis, Jack smashed open the vent and tried to let the woman escape first. The woman was soon able to climb out of the hole. After making sure everything was safe, the daughter was rescued, but Jack is too big to get through the vent. He couldn't hold the doorway for much longer. Jack decided to break his arm. With their combined efforts, they were able to pull the man up, but in the nick of time, the monster broke through the barrier and grabbed Jack by the thigh. The next moment, a huge force pulled the man down again. The wife and daughter watched as the man was torn apart, but could do nothing. Before the woman could calm her daughter, she realized the monster was approaching. The woman could only run away with her daughter, but just then, they suddenly looked behind them. It was a helicopter approaching. Rescue crew spotted the mother and daughter. They thought they were lucky to be saved. The mother yelled out and pulled her daughter with her, but the next moment, they were caught in a huge net. Then came some monsters. It turns out they weren't monsters, but armed men. But the real monsters were this family. 3 armed men were about to shoot them, but one of the humans suddenly died. It turned out that Jack didn't die, but came back to kill again. But even though the man was very strong, he still died under the cold muzzle of a gun. But the moment the soldiers turned around, the mother and daughter disappeared. Just as they began to search for them, suddenly the mother jumped on them. Seeing that her mother was also wounded, the girl exploded. All the armed men fell under the girl's claws, and the wounded began to mutate. It's a beetle with a lot of character. Just because the man said he was ugly, he stretched out his mirror towards the man's luxury sports car. He scratched the man's car along the way. Then he even finished the job in style. The surrounding audience was shocked with their mouth wide open while Linda, the owner of the car, was in a state of panic because the man Bob is the town's most famous racing driver. Jack rushed out of the car to explain to Bob, but when Linda was about to get out of the car, something strange happened. The window rolled up automatically. Panicked, Linda tried to get out. Linda tried to get out of the car, but the doors were unlocked just as Bob was about to get into trouble with them. But the crowd started to ask them to have a race. The excited Beetle ignored Linda's resistance. The Beetle took off on autopilot towards the starting point, seeing that his opponent was going to humiliate him with this antique. Bob, who was on top of his game, lost his mind and drove his luxury sports car to the starting point and decided to give him a fair fight. As soon as the car stopped, Bob turned on the supercharged power system. He's ready to stop Linda from even looking at the taillights. Linda panicked and turned on the front windshield wipers. And then, as the race car guy swung the car into action, the engine of the vintage Beetle came to a boil, and then he went into racing mode. He pushed the gas pedal straight into the gas tank. With Linda's ear-splitting screams, the two cars flew off the starting line, and to Linda's horror, the steering wheel was out of her control, and the car came out of the corner in a dragon-like fashion. Linda stepped on the brakes in a panic, but instead of slowing down, the car accelerated towards Bob. Bob didn't see Linda's shadow in the rearview mirror, but the next moment, he realized that the other car had caught up with him. Angry, he steered hard and slammed into the Beetle. The vintage Beetle waltzed down the road. After 3.5 weeks of spinning in place, the Beetle came to a safe stop. Seeing that Bob had the advantage, he tried to play dirty. Linda, who didn't want to race, was enraged. The Beetle, sensing the situation, turned up the power to the maximum. It ejected and reversed directly towards Bob. Bob's speed was already at 120. Just when he thought he was sure to win, the Beetle came back in reverse. He was so confused, he couldn't believe it, so he pulls back and tries to do the same thing. But the next scene turned his worldview upside down. Seeing that the other car was following closely behind him, Bob just kicked the gas to the floor. He wanted to cross the finish line as soon as possible to end the race, but at this critical moment, the Beetle suddenly turned around and headed straight for the roadside fence. This over 80 years old Beetle, he's going to compete with the top sports cars on the track. The key is that he can't do it without losing a single step. Feeling humiliated, Bob, the car god, crashed right into it, but instead of pushing the Beetle off the track, Linda's desire for victory was aroused. Putting her car in reverse, she caught up with the speeding Bob. Bob was panicked and just wanted to finish the race, but just as the finish line was approaching, the Beetle suddenly headed for the roadside fence. In a bizarre maneuver, Linda narrowly won the race, but you'll never imagine this powerful Beetle is a car that is going to be scrapped. A few days ago, he was taken to the junkyard. When the owner saw him, he said he was a money loser. I didn't expect him to be sprayed with black riders the next moment. The boss even said it was the ugliest Beetle he'd ever seen. When he said that, the boss was enraged. He pulled the chain and was going to send the Beetle to the recycling center. The panicked Beetle's eyes glanced over and accidentally saw the door to the junkyard, and then it started to drive itself, pulling the miserable boss towards the gate at a rapid speed. But just 2 meters away from the gate, the rear tire was punctured by a piece of iron on the ground. The poor man had to wait for the end of his life at the junkyard. But that day, he had a sudden change in his life. Linda, a recent graduate, was brought here by her father. Linda's father brought her here to give her a car as a graduation present, but she looked around the garage and couldn't find the one she wanted. She was about to go home disappointed. The Beetle passed behind her. She honked her horn like a savior, and it worked. Linda was like discovering a new world. Linda came this way as if she'd found a new world, but it was the green Nissan in front of her she was eyeing. But the Beetle and the claws won't give up and began to struggle. The next second, Linda had no choice but to buy the Beetle for a whopping $75. But as soon as he got in the car and put the key in, the Beetle started up on its own. It took off down the highway in a puff of smoke. Panicked, Linda grabbed the steering wheel and tried to control the car, but no matter how hard he tried, it didn't help. Instead, the Beetle took him to a garage. Luckily, Jack was able to react in time to prevent the Beetle from blowing his head off. In order to restore this out-of-print Beetle, they went to a nearby car park to look for parts, and that's how it happened. Linda drove this old car into Bob's top-of-the-line sports car. This was a big embarrassment for Bob, who was a car guy. In order to protect his image, he decided to hold a big race. The goal was to beat Linda in the race. Linda, in order to get the prize money for the race, immediately approached Chad. They decided to give the Beetle a makeover. Soon the Beetle was transformed. The Beetle was invincible in the race and came in second place in the race standings. But the night before the final race against Bob, Bob suddenly approached Linda and offered to raise the stakes. With a vintage Beetle, the girl made it to number 2 in the race leaderboard. But the night before the final race, she was approached by Bob, who was in first place. He offered to raise the stakes. Whoever won the race would get the other's car. He even invited Linda to experience his car. Linda, who comes from a racing family, couldn't refuse. While Linda was away, Bob was ready to study the Beetle, but the Beetle wasn't something he could just look at. First, they gave him a back massage, then he washed his face in motor oil, and finally, he gave him a cartwheel. Now Bob finally realized something was wrong. When the excited Linda came back from her test drive, she didn't even think twice about agreeing to Bob's terms. But what he didn't know was that the Beetle had overheard their conversation. By the time the next day's race came around, Beetle had played well in the first half of the race, but he knew that if he won the race, he would lose Linda's favor. So near the finish line, he slammed on the brakes and stopped before the finish line. Linda lost the race and the Beetle. In the end, she had to watch him get dragged away by Bob. But Bob doesn't get the Beetle for his collection. He sells it to a car race to destroy it. As the race began, all the cars hissed at the Beetle in the center. The Beetle was soon in tatters from the onslaught. But even then, they weren't ready to call it quits and drove out a giant SUV, ready to crush the poor Beetle into a pile of scrap metal. At this point, an anxious Linda finally arrived. But the owner said that only by winning the race, she could only take the Beetle if she won the race. Seeing the Beetle being tortured by the flying car, Linda rushed onto the track. Ignoring the danger, Linda went to the Beetle and apologized for what she had done. And the Beetle, sensing Linda's sincerity, was revitalized and excitedly rushed toward Linda. Just before the giant SUV was about to hit Linda, he saved Linda with his special skills and then ejected the driver from the car. The tacit understanding of one car and one man finally joined forces again. In order to take out the last buggy and win the race, they ran right into the overturned car next to them. And then they did the Tarzan crush. Linda won the race and brought home her favorite Beetle. While he and Jack were worried about repairs, his brother suddenly arrived with the team's mechanic. It turned out that his brother had a sudden illness before the race and could no longer drive, so the burden of winning the race fell on Linda, and the badly damaged Beetle was rebuilt with the efforts of everyone. Linda also changed into a racing suit. Linda had finally realized her dream of being a race car driver. Confidently, he raced on the track, enjoying the race to the fullest. But just as the race was going well, Bob, who already had a shadow over the Beetle, in order to secure his title, he made the 4 cars in his team to block Linda's path. He even crashed into the Beetle roughly. But this unexpectedly helped Linda. The Beetle's front end was turned around and climbed onto the roof of the car in front of her. It was so easy to get away from them, but Bob doesn't give up so easily. He swings the car from side to side, trying to block Linda's path. At that moment, Linda seized the opportunity to move to the outside of Bob's car, but what Bob didn't realize was that he was twisting and turning towards Linda over and over again. Just as Bob was about to take Linda out with one last shot, Linda slammed on the brakes. Linda drove the Beetle into the fence to avoid Bob's crash. Linda drove the Beetle right into the fence to avoid Bob and used the fence as a racetrack toward the center. She crossed the finish line in first place, beating Bob to become the youngest woman ever to win the race. And after this series of events, she and Jack were united in love. This man is enjoying the applause of the entire audience, but he's angered the bull. He saw the bull charging towards him in anger. He jumped on the fence, and to his surprise, he not only saved the day, he even captured the heart of a girl. The girl picked up his hat and returned it to him. She picked up his hat and gave it back to him, and he left with a smile on his face. Unbeknownst to him, the girl's eyes were staring at his back for a long time. Although it was only a short contact, Wendy knew that she had fallen hopelessly in love with that man. It could be thought that they might only have met once. Wendy's mood instantly became low, but the gears of fate had already begun to turn. At night, she was invited to a party. The dance floor was full of people letting off steam. She was the only one who looked out of place, so she went outside to get some air. But then she ran into Luke. "My hat looks just like yours." She followed the sound of the voice and her eyes lit up. She excitedly walked up to Luke to give him back his hat, but Luke said it looked better on her. She didn't say anything on the outside, but in her heart, she was already so happy. That's when they introduced themselves. Luke said he was a professional cowboy. His biggest dream is to become the world champion of bull riding. Wendy, on the other hand, is a senior art student with an almost obsessive passion for art. One of them is wild and rugged. The other is delicate and artistic. Obviously, their temperaments are completely opposite, but they are inexplicably attracted to each other. After a short while, they got more and more in touch with each other. They agreed to go to the bar for a drink, but then their girlfriends stumbled out. Looking at her drunken appearance, Wendy felt uneasy, so she decided to send her back. Before leaving, she told Luke her phone number. Luke immediately said he would call her. It was obvious that Luke had fallen in love with her in his heart. She felt a sense of joy in her heart. She couldn't help but fantasize about the sweetness of her future relationship with Luke. However, when she got back to her dorm room, she instantly became sober. It turned out that in 2 months, she would be going to New York for her internship. Her reasoning told her, instead of having a hard time parting ways, she should just not start right now. Her girlfriends were furious and advised her not to miss such a good opportunity. It's not easy to meet someone you like. Don't wait until you miss it and then regret it. Maybe she was swayed by her best friend's words. Maybe it's because she misses Luke like crazy. After rejecting hundreds of calls from Luke, she finally caught him back, and Luke didn't blame her for not answering his phone. Instead, He asked her to join him for dinner. Wendy didn't hesitate to say yes. Soon Luke arrived at the school with flowers in his hand. The girls at the school were attracted by her cowboy outfit, and Wendy's eyes were full of surprise when she saw her. They drove all the way to the countryside until they stopped in front of a lake, looking at the blue sky and mountains in front of them. Wendy felt like she was in a paradise. Luke set up a table by the lake and laid a tablecloth. Then he took out the barbecue that he had already prepared, so they enjoyed the scenery while drinking and chatting. Before they knew it, it was already evening, but they couldn't get enough of talking. They chatted from life to love and from love to dreams. As they got to know each other better, they liked each other more and more, and the way they looked at each other became more and more affectionate. But just when they were about to kiss each other, Wendy came to her senses just in time. She told Luke about her upcoming internship in New York, but Luke was a little upset, and Wendy felt the same way. Just as they fell into silence, the sky suddenly thundered. Luke hurriedly got up to take Wendy back, but on the way, they met a car accident. Luke immediately got out of the car to check the situation and found that a car had crashed into a tree. So he told Wendy to call the police, and he ran forward to save the old man in the driver's seat. The old man was already dying, but he kept asking them to bring the box in the car. They took the old man all the way to the hospital until they saw the old man was pushed into the emergency room. Only then did they finally breathe a sigh of relief. And after this incident, Wendy was completely devastated. He told Luke to go back and get some rest and said he'd take care of Luke here himself. He wanted to stay with them, but Wendy said she could handle it alone. Seeing this, Luke had no choice but to reluctantly leave, and looking at Luke's back, Wendy's heart couldn't help but be torn. On the one hand, she was in love with Luke, but on the other hand, it was her dream to work in New York. She didn't know what to do in front of her love and ideal. At that moment, she suddenly noticed the box that the old man had told them to take with them. Curious, she opened it and found that it was full of letters, all addressed to a girl. Even though she knew it was rude to read other people's letters in private, she couldn't control her curiosity and opened the letters. It was 1940, and the old man was helping out at his mother's store. He fell in love with a girl at first sight. After that, the girl's image was deeply rooted in his mind, but he was too timid to talk to her until she said hello to him. He was so excited. That night, he had the courage to buy a bouquet of flowers to express his love to the girl, but he saw that the girl was dating another guy. At that moment, his mood instantly fell to the bottom of the valley. He finally realized that a woman as beautiful as the girl would be pursued by many men. As a poor boy from the countryside, he didn't deserve her favor, so he threw the flowers into the garbage and decided to accept the cruel reality. But he didn't expect the girl to come to him this day and took the initiative to ask him why he never talked to him. Is she scary? He was incoherent and said no, but the girl suddenly asked him to take her home. On the way, she talked to him a lot. Slowly, she opened up to him, and their relationship quickly grew closer. After that day, they would go to dances together and go to the beach together. Soon after, the girl took him to meet her parents, and they made a promise to her that he would spend the rest of his life with her. But when they were about to get married, suddenly, war broke out and he was forced to join the army and go to the front. Before he left, the girl waved goodbye to him. She told him to come back alive. Unfortunately, the cruelty of war is far beyond anyone's imagination. During a mission, he tried to save a rich merchant's companion. He was hit by a bullet. Although he survived, he lost his fertility. At that moment, his world was plunged into darkness. After returning home, he didn't dare to see the girl because he knew she dreamed of having a bunch of children of her own. So when she found him, he told her about his inability to have children. Then he ruthlessly broke up with her. The girl was heartbroken and left, and he had no reason to live. But just as he was about to end his life, the girl found him. It's true that I want a child, but that's just a dream. You're the reality. I don't know what the future holds, but I know there's no future without you. At that moment, he couldn't restrain his true feelings any longer. He took the girl into his arms and hugged her tightly. Later, they entered into a marriage and walked hand in hand for the rest of their lives. After reading the story of the old man and the girl, Wendy suddenly thought a lot more clearly the reason why she didn't dare to be with Luke. She was afraid that they wouldn't be able to withstand a long-distance relationship. But if they truly love each other, then even a long-distance relationship can't separate them. Wendy's mood was instantly lightened by this realization. So the next day, when Nick came to the hospital, she no longer pushed Nick away from her. They read love stories with the old man and the girl together. They played pool and took pictures together. Besides, they went horseback riding on the farm. The air was sweet. The wind was sweet. Even everything around them was sweet. When they were tired, they would take a leisurely walk together. At this moment, the warm sunshine is pouring on their bodies, and the two hearts were getting closer. That day, Luke had a bull riding competition. Wendy brought her best friend to watch. When she saw Luke being thrown wildly by the bulls. Her heart was filled with nervousness and worry, and when Luke succeeded in advancing, she felt happy for Luke from the bottom of her heart because she loves Luke. Even though she knows this kind of sport is very dangerous, she chose to support Luke's dream. But at that moment, he didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. The next day, Wendy was invited to an art show. She thought Luke would support her art career the way she supported his dream. But when he looked at a piece of artwork that was clearly a ghost painting worth $20,000, Luke was speechless. He knew it was the proceeds of half a year's hard work on his family's farm, so he couldn't help but talk it out in front of Wendy's boss. Wendy got a little angry and thought, Luke should talk like that in front of his boss. A heated argument broke out between them. It was only then that they realized they had huge differences of opinion on some things. Eventually, they broke up. It was at this moment that Wendy's love for them suddenly faltered. She didn't know if they could continue to live together with such a huge difference of opinion. Confused, she approached the old man and told him about their conflicts. The old man told her the story of his marriage to the girl. It turns out that the old man and the girl after marriage is not without conflict. The girl loved art as much as Wendy did. In order to fulfill the girl's dream, the old man gave up his job and followed the girl to the holy land of art. Here she became a teacher. In order to make up for the regret of not having children, she poured all her love into her students. But every time she saw the warmth of her students and their parents together, the girl's desire to have a child became stronger and stronger. One day, she couldn't control her desire for a child any longer. She forced herself to divorce the old man, and the old man chose to let the girl pursue the happiness she wanted, even if the person who gave her happiness was not him. After the girl's departure, the old man lived like a lost soul, and just when he thought he might be stuck like this for the rest of his life, the girl came back because of his love for her. The old man gave up his job and followed her to the Mecca of art. And because of her love for the old man, the girl gave up the hope of having a child. Sometimes love is like this. You have to learn to sacrifice something for each other. After listening to the old man's story, Wendy pondered over it. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luke was distracted by his fight with Wendy. During the bull riding competition, he was thrown away. He fell to the ground. Wendy got the call and rushed to the hospital. She was relieved to see that Luke was okay, and she finally realized that her love for Luke was deep in her bones. So she decided to give up her dream of working in New York. She was ready to stay and live happily ever after with Luke, and because she was worried about Luke getting hurt again, she wanted Luke to stop riding bulls. But Luke's objections were strong. Luke said he wouldn't stop her from working in New York, and he wanted her to support his dream. And so they parted ways again, as if she could see through Luke's frustration. His mom, a veteran of the past, said in a heartfelt way, "Your dream of being a champion is for 8 seconds. That's all, but that girl is your partner for the rest of your life." The next day, Luke made it to the finals and was crowned world champion. He wanted to share his joy with Wendy as usual, but he realized that Wendy was no longer in the audience. It was then that he realized what he should have cherished. He ran out of the room like a madman. At that moment, Wendy was participating in an art auction. All the lots were from the old man's and the girl's collections. The first lot was the girl's self-portrait. Since it was only painted by the old man, it wasn't worth much. No one in the room is competing. The auction was about to fall through, but Luke appeared in time to win the auction. The moment she saw Luke, Wendy's eyes were full of surprise. Luke came to Wendy and confessed his love for her. "I realized that what I want is sitting in a chair. I realized that what I want is sitting right in front of me." Listening to Luke's true feelings, Wendy excitedly kissed Luke. At that moment, all the people there suddenly surrounded them. It turned out that the old man had told the auction house that whoever buys his wife's portrait painting, whoever buys his wife's calligraphy and painting will get all the lots, and these lots were worth tens of millions of dollars. In other words, Luke and Wendy became instant millionaires. By the end of the story, Wendy had opened a local art gallery, and Luke runs the family farm. They were both happy and joyful in their favorite professions. There's no such thing as perfect love. When two people are together, it's inevitable that they will encounter all kinds of conflicts. What we need to do is to understand each other and accommodate each other. An older man suddenly jumped out of the bushes and startled the woman. The woman was shocked because the man didn't look like a good person, so the woman ran as fast as she could, with the old man chasing after her. She ran for 5 kilometers in the field, but finally she couldn't run any longer. Then he grabbed the woman's clothes. Although the woman struggled desperately, she was no match for him. The man threw his fist down and the woman fainted on the ground. He picked up the woman and ran to the castle. In fact, he didn't rob the woman for himself. He wanted to sacrifice her to a 10,000-year-old mummy. Just a few days ago, The doctor dug up a sarcophagus. When he opened it, there was a mummy inside. The paperwork left in the sarcophagus says he was a king tens of thousands of years ago. The doctor saw that the mummy was so well preserved, it doesn't look like a dead person at all. The doctor immediately brought an electric shock device. One end was inserted into the mummy's feet and the other into the mummy's neck. Then the butler started to generate electricity manually. The mummy was electrocuted for a few hours and finally woke up. The doctor immediately brought milk to give the mummy some energy, but the mummy vomited immediately. And grabbed the butler's hand and started sucking blood. The doctor understood instantly. This mummy has been sleeping for tens of thousands of years. What it needs most is human blood. So the doctor immediately asked the butler to go to the village down the hill to catch some living people so that the mummy could suck enough blood. The butler went to the bottom of the hill and saw a woman saying goodbye to her husband. It turned out that the husband was going on a long trip. As soon as the boat the husband was on left, the butler was going to kill the woman. The butler ambushed the woman in the bushes. After chasing the woman for 5 kilometers, he finally caught her. After carrying her back to the castle, the doctor tightened a rope around the woman's arm. Then he used a sharp knife to bleed the woman. A big bowl full of blood. The blood looked like red wine. After bleeding, the doctor stopped the woman's bleeding because the doctor thought the woman could feed the mummy for at least a few months as long as he drank slowly and sparingly. By then, the woman had already woken up. Seeing the scene in front of her, she was about to struggle to escape, but the butler was quick to hold her down and tied her up with a rope. The doctor had already poured the bowl of blood into the teapot and fed it to the mummy. The mummy drank it up quickly, and the doctor was very tired. It wasn't long before the doctor and the butler fell asleep, but the woman couldn't sleep. She was trying to figure out how to escape. The mummy, after drinking the blood, was full of strength. He stood up and walked over to the woman. Then something unusual happened. The butler saw it and tried to stop it, but the mummy was so strong that he strangled the butler. The butler fainted. The woman tried to run away, but she panicked and couldn't open the door. The mummy grabbed the woman. The butler woke up and tried to stop her. The mummy immediately used hypnosis and turned the butler into his slave. The mummy ordered the butler to bring him a young woman every day. The mummy drained the woman's blood. After a while, when the doctor found out, he only saw the cold body of the woman, and the mummy hid behind the cupboard and knocked the doctor out with one punch. The mummy used hypnosis to make the butler carry the doctor into the basement and locked him in an iron cage. The butler then carried the women's bodies outside to dump them. The butler rowed a boat to the middle of the river and threw the bodies into the river. The butler went down the hill every day to arrest people specialized in women. On this day, he saw this woman saying goodbye to her husband. As soon as the man left, the butler chased after the woman. The woman was desperately trying to climb up the hill, but the uncle grabbed her. The woman grabbed a stone and hit it as hard as she could, but the uncle was determined to take the woman back. In the end, he grabbed the woman's feet tightly. He pulled her down hard. The woman resisted desperately. He could only throw his fists and knock her unconscious. Then he carried her on his shoulders. He wanted to take the woman back to the castle because there is a mummy in the castle who needs to suck the blood of pretty girls. The woman was tied up. The mummy took out a red-hot iron bar and burned a mark on the woman's body, and the woman's husband had realized something was wrong. He crept to the castle and climbed in through the dog hole, but the man was still scared to death when he saw the tall mummy. The mummy was so close that the man fell down a deep well. Luckily, he grabbed the edge with his hands, but the mummy used a red-hot iron bar to burn the man's hand. The woman's poor husband died in the well. Then the mummy was going to kill the woman. The woman resisted. The mummy used a whip to beat the woman dozens of times. In the end, the woman was beaten into submission and was drained of blood by the mummy. The butler continued to look for fresh women for the mummy. When he saw Anna washing clothes by the river, he had a firm lock on the target. The butler ambushed Anna when she came to dry her clothes. He then rushed forward. Anna was so frightened that she ran away. Running into the woodshed, she hit the butler hard with firewood, but the housekeeper didn't give up and tried to catch Anna to prevent her from running out. But Anna kicked him hard. Anna ran and hid in another house. She pressed the door against the wall with a bench, and Anna took a shotgun from the wall to kill the intruder. The butler was banging on the door. Anna had climbed up to the attic and aimed her gun at the butler, but the butler had already spotted Anna, so he hid against the wall. The butler decides to enter through the roof by removing the tiles. He removed the roof tiles. Anna noticed the noise inside the house and fired immediately, but the shot was too early and didn't hurt the butler, and the butler quickly made a hole in the roof, and he got in at once because Anna's gun only had one bullet. Now she could only fight with the butler, but the butler's strength was too great. He quickly grabbed Anna with his backhand and pressed Anna out. But on the way down to the attic, Anna tried to take advantage of the opportunity to escape, but in the end, she was caught by the cunning butler. Soon Anna was taken to the basement of the castle. When Anna saw the mummy, Anna was shocked by the size of the mummy. This time, the mummy didn't want to use coercion, but hypnotize Anna. Soon Anna was hypnotized. She could not help but take off her leg socks. Next, Anna was still not able to escape being drained of her blood. A few days later, Two women arrived at the castle on horseback. They turned out to be the doctor's daughters. When they entered the castle, they realized that their father and the butler had been taken over by the mummy. The mummy first used hypnosis to control one of the girls, but the other one took advantage of the situation and ran away. The mummy rode on a horse in hot pursuit. After 10 kilometers, the girl fell off her horse. The mummy rode after her. The girl was killed in the end. The butler finally came to his senses and released the doctor from the cage. The doctor chopped off one of the mummy's hands with an axe and nailed it to the wall. He locked the mummy in the basement, but in the middle of the night, the hand moved on the wall. It crawled all the way down to the basement and became one with the mummy. By morning, the mummy had drained the doctor of his blood, and the doctor's other daughter had gone mad. Henry picked up the big, strong tree and tried to uproot it, because there were 3 other soldiers in the tree trying to kill Henry with their bows and arrows. But Henry shook the tree like an earthquake. The soldiers in the tree were so scared that they couldn't do anything. Finally, Henry hugged the tree and used all his strength. The tree was uprooted, and all the soldiers fell from the tree. Then Henry fought with 3 soldiers. Henry grabbed one of the soldiers and used it as a weapon, wounding them all badly, and a tiger came crawling up to him. It jumped down into a pit. The prince was kidnapped by the bandits. Just as the tiger was about to eat the prince, Henry jumped down and fought the tiger. Henry grabbed the tiger's bloody mouth and tore it apart. But the king of the forest isn't called the king of the forest for nothing. His bite is strong. The tiger and the man were in a stalemate for a while, but it was hard to tell the difference between them. Finally, Henry seized the opportunity and grabbed the tiger's neck. After a few minutes, the tiger was strangled by Henry. The prince fainted at the sight of this ferocious scene. After killing the tiger, Henry rescued the prince. Henry arrived at the Shaolin Temple and was greeted by the abbot and his disciples, and he treated the prince. When the prince returned to the kingdom, he realized that the prime minister had made himself king, and he was going to kill all his loyal subjects. The loyalists were executed with their heads stuck in a wooden box. An 8-horse wagon pulled a huge sword, and heads fell wherever they went. When Henry saw this in the crowd, he rushed right up to them. He wanted to stop the loyalists of the second step from being beheaded. Henry pulled the wagon tightly. The 8 horses ran for their lives, but Henry's strength was too great. And he finally pulled the horses back. This saves the lives of the prisoners. Henry overturned the wagon. The prime minister was furious and ordered his soldiers to arrest Henry. Henry escaped and made his way to the prince's village. The prince had gathered a large number of soldiers who wanted to attack the chancellor and take back his throne. The prince led hundreds of soldiers into the city, but they were ambushed by the chancellor. The prince and the righteous were all arrested. The chancellor wants to cut off the prince's head so that there would be no more worries. Henry was in the dungeon, pushing the ground. Henry's force was so great that he pushed the ground into several cracks. The ground shook, and the prime minister and the soldiers were running around in fear. The prince and his soldiers took advantage of the situation and killed the prime minister. At last, the prince regained his kingdom, and he and the queen were happy together, and Henry left the land without looking back. A woman rode her dog across the street. The car swerved to avoid her and crashed into a cliff. Her companion and the driver died instantly. Jack ran off immediately with a small suitcase because they had just robbed a jewelry store. But Jack was running too fast and was hit by a car. The case tumbled through the air in a beautiful arc. The diamonds in the case were scattered all over the road. Jack couldn't be bothered to pick them up. He doesn't want to be arrested and sent to jail, but the boss won't let him go when he gets back. You've lost tens of billions of dollars worth of diamonds. Boss Black ordered Jack to complete a more difficult task, to steal a treasure. He will make up for his mistakes. Jack had to go to Germany, where the treasure was located. It was freezing cold here. The 2 companions took Jack straight to the island where the treasure was. They arrived at the entrance to the floor where it was located. They were able to grab the treasure without any problems. But on the way down, there were a lot of workers in the elevator. Bob told them to get the hell out of there. They were running, but the workers didn't take it seriously. Bob finally got angry and pulled out his gun. "Get out of here, or I'll kill you." Now the employees were scared, but then the elevator broke down. It stopped at 1 floor. Bob couldn't escape, so he took everyone in the elevator as hostages. He let them all out of the elevator with these hostages in hand. He's not afraid that he can't escape. Bob first held down a hostage and wanted to see if the elevator was still working, but he didn't expect a big steel knife to come out of the elevator. It cut off the hostage's head. Bob was scared and came to find Jack. When they saw the elevator, they realized that this floor is not so simple. It turns out there's an ogre on this floor who wants to eat everyone here. The ogre started hunting everyone. One man was so scared he ran for his life. The ogre was so tired of chasing him that he could only activate a mechanism. A lot of soldiers suddenly popped up on the floor. His foot was pierced. The ogre came slowly and tore him apart with a sharp knife. Jack and Anna tried to run away, but they run into the ogre. Jack and the ogre went at it. The ogre was defeated, but Anna's ear was nailed to the wall by the ogre's dart. In the end, Jack had to quickly peel Anna away. Anna lost half her ear, but survived. Jack went to find his companion, Bob. Bob was unconscious, but suddenly woke up and punched Jack twice. It turns out that Bob was in a coma and thought the ogre was coming. Jack was then stabbed by his companion. Bob, Jack, and the building's security guards fought against the ogre, but they were no match for the ogre. In the end, Jack used a dead rat to light a fire and burned the ogre to death. Jack was finally able to take the treasure, but Anna escaped, and Boss Black was waiting outside. Jack made up for his mistake, and the boss was so happy that he gave Jack $500,000 for a vacation. Jack and Anna were happy together ever since. The old man had just returned home from an activity when he realized that a strange girl had come to his house. But no matter how the old man searched his memory, he could not remember having seen the girl in front of him. When he saw his disciple trying to wake up the girl, but the old man stopped him. But their movement still woke up the girl, perhaps because she was still awake. She asked Kono who he was. It was only when the apprentice reminded her that she realized that she was the one who broke into someone's house. She was the one who broke into someone else's house. The girl explained that her name was Yunjo. On her way home from school, she saw a ladder on the wall and was curious. Before Kono and the others could react, Yunjo got up and walked outside. Although they spent less than 5 minutes together, but Yunjo's youthfulness left a deep impression on Kono because Yunjo looked so much like his first girlfriend. While Kono was upset that he didn't leave the girl's contact information, the next day, his apprentice came to the door again, saying he'd met Yunjo on his way here. Seeing that she was looking for a part-time job, and considering Konfumi's age and living alone, he took it upon himself to hire Yunjo to take care of him. Despite his excitement, Kono was still calm and relaxed. While cleaning, Yunjo's big personality caught Kono's attention again. It was as if his mind had traveled back 50 years. At that time, he had a short but happy time with his first love. It was raining heavily that night. Konfumi had to take Yunjo in for the night. He wanted to put him in the living room, but he didn't realize that after he fell asleep, Yunjo sneaked into his bed. A girl works as a part-time nanny in a rich man's house. She's a big-hearted girl, but she didn't realize that the old man was looking at her differently. I don't know if it was accidental or not, when she realized that Konbun would often peek at her behind her back. Yunjo began to make verbal hints to him, both intentionally and unintentionally. After all, it's not often that Konfumi, a famous writer, is as shy as a young man. It was raining heavily the night before. Konfumi remembered that he had closed the door to his room, but he didn't expect Yunjo to climb into his bed. But then, Ida's voice came from outside the door. Konfumi was so scared that he got up quickly. He didn't want his disciple to see him in such a state, but Yunjo felt that she was not afraid of the shadows. She walked out of the room wearing Konfumi's clothes. Even Inuyasha could see that something was wrong. He realized that his good intentions might have gone astray. After all, Yunjo was the one who brought her here in order to take care of Konfumi's childbearing. Inoue was trying to get him to stay away from Yunjo. After all, the age difference between them was too great. If outsiders found out about it, it would cause an uproar. Just to be on the safe side, Inoue found Yunjo alone while he was out hiking, but Anjiao didn't care. She said she was an adult and had the right to make her own choices. During the argument, Inoue accidentally knocked down Anjiao's favorite mirror. Anjiao was furious. The mirror was a birthday gift from her mother. Seeing how much Anjiao cared about the mirror, Kono didn't say a word. Konfumi climbed down and picked up the mirror, and it was this action of Kono's. Anjiao's attitude towards her changed. The old man fell in love with his nanny, considering that the old man is already 70 years old. In order to prevent the old man's health from accidents, the apprentice decided to sacrifice himself. He confesses his love to the nanny ahead of him. Yunjo doesn't realize that it's Inoue's plan. She continues to play with him without a care in the world. But then the old man came back from outside. As Yunjo went out to greet Konfumi, Inoue found Konfumi's manuscript in the cupboard. It turned out that Konfumi was thinking of his first love on Yunjo. Looking at Konfumi's meticulous portrayal of his feelings, Ida was touched. He knew that the reason why Konfumi hid the manuscript in the cabinet. He knew that Konfumi had hidden the manuscript in the closet because he didn't want it to be published. But Inoue felt that if he secretly publishes this manuscript, it would be a big hit. Although he knew that he would be sorry to Konfumi, but his desire for fame and fortune made him lose his mind. And what happened afterward was just as Inoue had predicted. Once the book was released, it became a hit with readers. Inoue himself was nominated for several literary awards, but paper can hold fire after all. Konfumi eventually found out about it, but because Inoue had been taking care of him, Konfumi thought twice about it. Konfumi thought it over and decided to let Inoue go. But what Konfumi didn't expect was that Konfumi's mercy led to an irreversible change. Yunjo found the book. When she saw the passionate emotions in the book, Yunjo thought that Inada was really in love with her. Yunjo, who had never been in love before, was overwhelmed by the contents of the book. However, when faced with Yunjo, instead of explaining himself, he took Yunjo's first time. Dramatically, Yoonju realized something was wrong when she came back from Inoue's place, because some of the scenes described in the book only happened when he was with Kanfumi, and Inoue had met her more than a handful of times in total. She realized that Inoue must have stolen Kanfumi's word, and the man who loved her deeply was actually Kanfumi. On the face of it, it looks like the woman's got her clubs in her hand, ready to hit the ball, but in fact, she is staring at the house across the street with a grimace on her face. After making an important phone call, she then gracefully swings her cue to knock out the sprinklers on her lawn, one after the other. And the reason a woman does this is not insanity. She's fighting for her happiness. An hour ago, two women over 100 years old met at a bar to catch a man, but the redhead is dressed like a black widow. It's hard to look at her, so sexy Renee decided to help pick out the clothes herself, but the closet was full of sweaters of every color. When women go out clubbing, there's two ways they compare a pretty girl or pretty girl grenade. Which do you want to be? And finally, the woman chooses a black dress. Love the plunging neckline. That is the back. As soon as they arrived at the bar, Renee had her eye on a sexy, brooding young man. Bree, seeing that it was her decorator, kindly warned her partner that he had a girlfriend, but Renee didn't care. She downed the rest of her drink in one gulp and was ready to flirt. Bree thought she'd soon see her friend make a fool of herself, but the waitress told her that the man had just been dumped by his girlfriend this afternoon. That's why he came to the bar to get drunk. The woman was both happy and worried. She had been thinking about him for a long time, until yesterday, when she saw that he had a girlfriend. Renee was about to be robbed by someone else. How could she do that? Bree turned to look at herself in the mirror and immediately had a plan. A minute later, a woman in a sexy low-cut dress appeared in the lobby of the bar, and she just happens to run into Kings. When he realized he was leaving, Renee assumed his friend had gotten away with it, but in fact, the man had just gone to his car. He'd be back later to take Rainy home himself. Upon learning this, Bree began to make all sorts of excuses to persuade her friend to be a little more reserved. Unfortunately, that word never entered her vocabulary. She couldn't let another woman take advantage of the man she'd fallen in love with first. After arriving home, she stood in front of the lawn with a golf club in her hand, looking across the street at Renee's house with a grumpy face. Then she picked up the phone and called Kings, lying that there was an emergency at home and she needed his help. Of course she had to do the whole thing. Although her tactics were a bit underhanded, she managed to save the man from the tiger's jaws, and to show her appreciation, she invited him to dinner tomorrow night. Renee knew exactly what had happened last night. No one had ever taken a man from his bed before, and that definitely aroused her spirit of triumph. From this moment on, the battle between the two women began. Renee was the first to strike. Upon learning that her rival already had a grandson, she immediately contacted an important person. That night, Bree was preparing to leave with Kings. She didn't expect her daughter to bring her grandson. It was supposed to be a happy moment of reunion, but the mother and son came at a bad time, especially Benjamin, who kept saying, "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma, my grandma has bad circulation. Don't you, Grandma? Please stop calling me that, you precious child." It wasn't until after Kings left, Bree realized the real reason for Daniel's surprise visit. "When your friend called, she said you were having a hard time since. Is this friend named Renee? She sent us first-class tickets. I wish I had a friend like that." Now that she knew her rival was behind it, she wasn't going to sit still. But how could she humiliate her rival? Lynette was an old friend of Renee's. She knew she was a bad person, especially when it came to stealing men, so she's happy to do her friend a favor. It's just that she doesn't think the things she knows are very useful, like the fact that Rennie's navel looks a little strange, or the fact that she seems a little paranoid about dwarves. On the face of it, that's not very helpful, but in reality, it was exactly what Bree wanted. The next night, Renee and Gus had dinner together. Everything was going well at first, but then something flickered. The woman immediately became nervous, and just as she was reassuring herself that she might have been mistaken, she was startled by a small child passing by. Renee didn't want Jinx to think she was a weirdo, so she explained, but then a midget appeared. She was so scared, she started screaming. Jinx was at a loss for words. Everyone was looking at their table, and the out-of-control woman saw that the dwarf wasn't leaving. She carefully grabbed a coat and threw it down. It covered the dwarf's entire body. After the coat was removed, the dwarf said he had mistaken the man for someone else, but he left and went to a private room. The best of the best are the best of the best. The next day, Rennie approached Bree. Wanting to have a good time, he asked Kings to choose between them. If you had to choose between forest grain or brown for the trim, which would you prefer? Bree was afraid that she would lose, and even more afraid of becoming the desperate and horny divorcee that outsiders said she was. But Renee didn't think she had to worry about what people would think. But since Bree really liked Kings, she was willing to make it work. Then go for it. My gift to you. Why are you being so nice to me based on my dinner under the rainbow last night? I'd rather have you as a friend than an enemy. The wallpaper has gone up by 1 foot. The woman wants to put it back down. The woman tried to push it back down, but maybe it's just that it's been so long that it's no longer sticky. She tried several times but couldn't get the wallpaper back. The woman was furious and pulled it violently. Looking at the thing in her hand, she felt a sense of relief. The next second, she started a crazy mode of tearing the paper, so as to vent her repressed feelings. It wasn't long before the whole room was almost trashed, and she did feel better. The next day, Bree found a painter to redecorate the living room. Just as they were discussing what color would be more appropriate, her ex-husband too came to deliver the pre-divorce property settlement agreement. After that, they had nothing more to do with each other. What Bree didn't expect was that less than a week after their separation, the man had taken up with his physical therapist, and the two of us spent so many years being miserable. I just think at our age, we can't let an opportunity for happiness pass us by. Bree returned home in a daze. The painter just happened to have picked out a color called Moonstruck. She looked at the seriously sexy man. There was something different in her eyes. Keynes was a nice young man who offered to fix the little girl's bike, but what he didn't know was that it had already become the object of someone else's desire. Just now, he accidentally found a piece of fine wood. He couldn't help but pull Bree along with him to feel the amazing texture of the wood, but it was such a simple gesture that made the woman's heart flutter. To hide her bad feelings, she fled back to the car, but her eyes were still fixed on the man outside the car, so much so that she forgot to back up the car. Scanning the rearview mirror, Bree rushed out of the car to check on him and found the little neighbor girl she'd knocked to the ground. Luckily, Juanita only suffered minor injuries, otherwise she would have been dead. Gabe didn't say anything in front of everyone, but when she took the two of them aside, she went ballistic. First you take out my mother-in-law, then you go after my daughter. Are you trying to kill off everyone eat us at least on the planet? Bree apologized. She explained to her son that she had been listening to the radio too much. Is that true? Well, Andrew was standing not far away. He said that his mother was looking at Chins as if she was staring at a nice steak, and he was kind enough to point out that the man was 15 years younger than him. But who can't love a young, handsome man? As soon as Bree arrived home, he saw the man working shirtless. Keynes saw him come home and put on his clothes. Unfortunately, he had put them on backwards. He had no choice but to take it off and put it on again. The woman was going to put something in the refrigerator when she saw the man taking his clothes off again. She couldn't help but look at him, but the milk in her hand accidentally fell off and hit her feet. Jakes thought she was still upset about the accident. He thought she was still feeling guilty about bumping into Juanita today. So he thought it would be sweet of him to come forward and give her a gentle hug. He was oblivious to the consequences of his actions. Bree's heart was racing, but in the end, sense prevailed. I have to let you go, huh? After you let me go, everyone should just let go. Keynes was surprised, but with such an unstable employer, the best thing to do was to get out of there. The next day, the neighbor's old lady noticed that the sexy painter had disappeared. To be honest, even though he was old, her heart still pounded every time it passed by her house. And for a single woman in her middle age, the temptation is even greater. Bree didn't want to get her into a relationship again. Well, let me run the numbers for you. My marriage ended 6 days ago. Keith is 15 years too young for me, and my track record with lovers. To Deb, one in a wheelchair. Karen is a veteran, and she advises her partner not to suppress her feelings too much. Be brave and do what you want to do. Bree listened to her and thought about it. She thought the old lady was right, so she took the initiative to find Keynes and hoped that he would return to work for her. Unfortunately, he didn't want to work for an employer who might be looking for trouble. The woman could see that he didn't want to, so she couldn't say anything else. She walked out the door and was about to drive away, but just as she was backing up, there was another scream from behind her. She got out of the car to check, only to find that Keynes had been knocked to the ground by himself. What are you doing behind my car? Oh, I thought about what you said. It'd be a shame if we didn't finish what we started. The Boy is a nightmarish horror journey that leads the viewer into an endless dark abyss. The director uses classic horror elements in this movie, such as eerie sound effects, realistic nightmare scenes, and tense camera switches, which successfully creates a tense and disturbing atmosphere. The whole story is full of unpredictable and frightening twists and turns, thus triggering the audience's curiosity and tension. Every corner may hide a horrible secret, making the movie watching process ready to face sudden scares. The plot of the movie is cleverly designed to put the characters in a scary situation that makes you tense for the safety of the main character. The performances of the actors are also a highlight of the movie. They managed to convey the characters' sense of fear and helplessness in the face of a supernatural threat. Somewhere in a quiet corner of the English countryside towers a luxurious and elaborate villa. The villa belongs to the aging Mr. and Mrs. Herschel. One day, the villa welcomes a young girl. The girl's name is Greta Lauren Cohen, and for some reason she wishes to escape from her previous life, as well as being hired by the Hetchards for a strange job. The Hetchards are about to go on vacation, and they ask Greta to take care of their son, Brahms. a boy-like figure. In the meantime, Greta is amused at first, but sees the seriousness of the couple and tries to control her curiosity as much as possible. The couple sets a no-go clause for Greta, but when they leave, Greta ends up breaking it. To her disbelief, it is as if Brahms actually has a vivid life. Such emotional resonance strengthens the strong connection between the viewer and the movie, making the entire horror experience all the more real and profound. Overall, The Boy is an extremely creative and tense horror choice. Several of the young actors sell themselves well. The men are handsome and the women are beautiful. It's just a pity that the director, apart from the aesthetics of the picture, the sense of horror and excitement is lackluster. This movie is based on real events, but it fails to grasp the inquisitiveness and mystery of real events. It would have been more realistic if it had been presented as a full-fledged faux documentary. This movie should learn from Wen Ziren's The House of the Underworld, which is also a scientific psychic, and he made it with ups and downs and climaxes. This movie can also be haunted in the phenomenon, attic strange sounds, wall stains, crows hit the window, sleepwalking in the middle of the night, ghostly shadows behind, closet strange smile, ghosts under the bed, puppets come back to life, and even the house collapsed. But the director ditched all that and tried to play with some depth. Think about White Noise, which is also a scientific psychic. Although it is also warm-hearted but not scary enough, but at least it lets the audience know that this is also a form of psychic channeling. And in this movie, what kind of scientific way do these guys get psychic? This is puzzling. Viewers are in for a fear-filled time, with unpredictable plot developments and realistic performances that are sure to impress. If you seek a thrilling horror ride, this movie is not to be missed.